Evening. Can you please welcome to the Baobab on stage the one and only Mike Hatchard.
Well, thank you very much. I got asked to do one of these last week. Well, he asked me to do the two. I said, what do you want me to do? How does it work? He said, well, fine, you just go out and talk about your life. So I thought, yeah, last week would be like a rehearsal, and tonight is the proper gig. But in actual fact, last week went really well, so I decided to make that the gig, and this is the rehearsal. Thank you. So basically, yeah, you're wondering, who am I? No, it's not my regular audience, is it? I'm not suggesting that you're not regular, but no, there's no, anybody know me at all? Anybody ever heard me play? Just, oh, not many. Oh, you're putting your hand up, that's great. You're not from Surrey by any chance, are they? Because they do that a lot in Surrey, they put their hand up a lot. I was doing this pantomime in Surrey, and they're very compliant, the people in Surrey, because I was really giving it some, going, oh no it isn't, oh no it isn't. And they're all going, yes, you're quite right, it's not. But anyway, I digress. So I'm going to talk, basically, I agreed to talk about how I came to cycle to Spain and other bits of Europe, playing the violin in the footsteps, or cycle steps, I suppose, of Laurie Lee when I was a teenager. And how many, many years later, when I hit 60, I decided that I wanted to cycle from Land's End to John O'Groats towing a piano. So this is basically how that came about. So I suppose as a prelude, I'd better talk about how I actually came into the music business, which was a slightly odd way in. When I was 10, we had this piano in the house, and I remember very distinctly, I was just sitting there one day, and I realised that I could actually sort of play tunes by ear. I remember playing, you remember the Z-Cars tune? Yum, pum, pum, yum. And I was playing that, and I found that very exciting. So I decided there and then, I thought, right, that is what I'm going to do in my life. I'm going to be a piano player. Absolutely, I mean, I remember that moment, that Damascus moment. I thought, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And I went out the next day, and I spent all of my pocket money. I had to borrow an extra sixpence because sheet music cost 3 shillings, and I only got 200 tanner pocket money. And most of you are thinking, what the hell is 200 tanner? But that was before we had, that stuff we've got now, that new stuff. And I went out and bought Puppet on a String, which was #1 in the charts at the time. And I sort of took it home and worked out how to play it. And I took it to bed with me, and I just loved it. I was absolutely obsessed with it. And I guess now you'd probably say I was on the spectrum or something, but I became completely hooked on playing pop music at the age of 10. And a week later, I went out and bought Simon Smith and his Dancing Bear. A week after that, I bought Something Stupid. A week after that, I bought Georgie Girl, Penny Lane, Mellow Yellow, Strawberry Fields Forever. And I must have been very weird just sitting at the age of 10, playing all these tunes on the piano. And I decided that I wanted to study piano properly, so I heard about this kid at school. He was having lessons up the road. So he told me where his piano teacher lived, and I went to see her, and I knocked on the door, and I said, I'd like piano lessons, please. And she looked at me and said, do your mummy and daddy know you've come to see me? I said, no. And she said, well, I've never known a child knock on my door before and ask for piano lessons. This is the first. So she said, I think I'd better come and talk about it with your parents. Where do you live? So I told her where I lived, and she turned up, and my mother very reluctantly agreed to it. When she discovered the cost of the piano lesson, she was absolutely horrified, but she did let me study the piano. And then very shortly afterwards, they decided that, well, my mother specifically said, you can't just play the piano all the time, so they rationed me to an hour a day, which, in my experience of teaching, which is fairly limited, I've discovered that is quite the reverse to how most kids are. And that's how it was. I was allowed to play the piano for an hour a day, and at 6 o'clock to 7, and at 7 o'clock my brother would be there with his finger on the TV, and he'd be going, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, shut up now! And that was it, which is horrible. I'm glad you find it amusing. I'm still quite bitter about it. Anyway, when I was, but I went to this awful school, Paul Grammar School. Really, yeah, it's brilliant. Isn't it great? I never imagined when I was at school, sort of being oppressed by these teachers, that years later I would get this opportunity to stand in front of quite a sizable audience and say, what a shit school. I feel good already for saying that. But there was no music there at all, no music whatsoever. And no, when I was about 14, I was on a pub crawl with my friend Ken, or Stanley as I used to call him, which seems quite remarkable now, but I mean, that's what we all did. It wasn't that unusual for that age to go to a pub. And we went to the Branksome Arms in Parkstone, and there was this piano. We could see this piano inside. So I said, come on, there's a piano, let's go in. And he, bold as anything, he was a year older than me, but he was only 15, and he went up to the barman, and he said, can my friend play the piano? And I always remember this bloke looking at it and saying, I don't know, can he? You know. And anyway, there was this piano, and he said, I suppose he can, if he knows how to play it, he can. And all these people played darts. The dartboard was right above the piano. And the piano was very sort of punctured, as you can imagine, and they very begrudgingly agreed to move the dartboard about a foot to the right. So I sat down, very nervous, and I started playing the piano. And I thought, well, they're not going to want Mozart or Bach in the play. I don't know how I knew that, but something intuitive told me they weren't going to get their rocks off on Mozart. So I started playing all these tunes that some of them I just heard on the TV and stuff, and things like Mother Kelly's Doorstep, or the pop tunes that I was talking about. And all these people started gathering around, singing along, and they started giving me money. I said, not a fortune, but for me. Yeah, somebody gave me like 2 shillings. That was my pocket money, more or less, then. I couldn't believe it. And then this bloke said, here, you're a dab hand on that old Joe, and how much my son? Can I get you a drink? And I didn't want to appear as naive as I was. I didn't want them to know that I didn't know anything about drinking culture at all. Never had a drink in my life. So I tried to put it out, I said, yes, I've got beer. And this arrived. I've seen my father drink beer. It looked quite nice. It was nice and orange and everything. And I tried it. It was horrible. But I didn't let them know that. And then somebody else offered me a drink. And I didn't want to know. I didn't want to appear naive. So I reasoned that a serious drinker would not drink the same drink the second time. So I said I was a Scotch. And then it happened again. I asked for gin and tonic. And I was playing the piano, desperately thinking of something else to ask for in case they asked me for. And I said, creme de menthe. That came to me. And they're all lined up on top of the piano, all these drinks, all different colours. And the creme de menthe, oh God, it was lovely. I drank that very quickly. I had another one of those. And I can't tell you much about the rest of the evening. I don't know why, I don't remember any of it. But anyway, my status at school suddenly went right through the roof because this boy said to me, "Was that you?" I got this job. It was a little bit later, but I got a regular job playing the piano at the Sweet Home Inn, and I was only just 15. Week after my 15th birthday, I know that because I kept a diary. And somebody at school said, "Was that you playing the piano at the Sweet Home Inn on Friday?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "How much did you get for that then?" And I said, by then it was decimal, so I said £2.50. He said, "You're joking." He said, "I get up at 6 o'clock every morning, 6 days a week, doing newspaper round, and I get, pardon my French, a fucking quid." And so my status went right through the roof. About the only time in my life I ever felt wealthy, if I'm honest. But anyway, when I was 15, I got my piano teacher went to Wales. She said it was pure coincidence, but I'm not sure. And she turned up one day and she said, "Michael, you expressed an interest in the violin, and I've got 4 in my attic. Would you like them?" And she gave me 4 violins. So I looked at these violins, and 3 of them I gave away. One of them actually said Stradivarius inside it, and I took it down to Don Strike's music shop in Westbourne Arcade. And he said, "No, it's not a Stradivarius." He said, "I wouldn't give you a £5 for that," so I gave that one away as well. But I kept one of them. And I taught myself to play it. The piano, I had legitimate lessons, as I told you, but my violin playing was very strange. I was walking down the sandbanks one afternoon with this violin, a couple of days after I'd been given it, no idea how to play it at all. And can I put this down? So I got this violin, no idea how to play it. If you ever heard of somebody attempt to play the violin, it's pretty excruciating. It's not to be recommended. And then it sort of occurred to me how you might play it. So I stopped by the side of the road and sort of tried something, you know. And I thought, yeah, I'm getting there. By the time I got to my mates, I could play it after a fashion. Now, it can't have been very good. I'm not under any illusion that I was some kind of prodigy or anything, but I was so confident. When you're 15, you do have that incredible arrogance, don't you? And I decided to go busking a couple of weeks later. And I stood in Poole bus station one night, and no, I was in a subway, and I was playing the violin. And very self-consciously, some Irish guys passed me. And this is a weird coincidence. These guys passed me, and they gave me I don't know, 50p or something, which seemed a fortune, and that justified having a violin. But shortly after that, and this is something that, looking back, seems quite extraordinary now, but at the age of, again, before my 15th birthday, I hitchhiked to Folkestone one night, and I got a lift with 4 Irish guys, and one of them said that they'd seen me play the violin in the subway. Weird coincidence. And they gave me a car. Because they said, we stole him this car. We stole it from Hemel Hempstead. And I'm like, absolutely true. They said, we stole this car. If you want it, you can have it. You know? I said, are your fingerprints recorded anywhere? I said, no, you can have it if you want it. And I sort of pretended I knew how to drive, and I found myself in Eastbourne at 2 in the morning with a violin, a sleeping bag, and a stolen car. But I couldn't drive it. I stalled it a couple of times, and I just carried on hitchhiking. But I read this book. This is what this is building up to. Actually, no, there's one other thing I'd like to tell you before I get onto the fiddle thing. When I was 16, there was a job advertised in Melody Maker. And it said, pianist wanted on the Costa Dorada. And I wrote a letter, and I don't have a copy of this letter, obviously, because I sent it off, but I wish I had a copy of it. I'd love to know how well I must have sold myself at 16, because I got a letter back, and it said, you sound absolutely perfect for the job, but we found somebody, but we'll keep you in mind. Right? And then, about a fortnight later, I got a telegram, and it said, pianist has broken leg, come out as soon as you can, send telegram to say when you'll arrive. And so I went out to the Costa Dorada. I flew to Barcelona, never been abroad before. By that time I was just 17, if you know what I mean, and I got on this train, 30 miles up the road to Killaley, and this woman came out and she looked at me and she said, oh my God. She said, you're not Mr. Hatchard? I said, yeah. She said, oh no. She said, you only look about 19. I said, I'm 17. She said, oh, no! From your letter, I thought you were 50 at least. And she said, you can't possibly do a job like this. But she said, what are you going to do? Supposing somebody asked you to play, I don't know, if you were the only girl in the world, what are you going to do? I said, I'd play it. She said, well, there's a piano, play it. So I sat down and played it, and she said, oh, all right. And I was out there for 6 weeks. 6 weeks in Spain, playing every night in a place called Popper's Bar from 8 in the evening to about 3 in the morning, everybody buying me drinks. It never occurred to me that there was anything negative about drinking. I don't drink much now. I do drink, but in extreme moderation. But at 16, I just had no concept of it. And they locked me in the place one night because I was so out of it, they thought I'd get arrested if I was allowed to wander the streets. And I woke up about 5 in the morning with the sun shining through this skyline. But anyway, I read this book by Laurie Lee, and it said, How I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning. How many times I thought I'd only been talking about 5 minutes. Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, yeah, where was I? Yeah, so in this book, Laurie Lee, I'm sure you know it, are you familiar with the book? Anybody? Yeah. It's a sequel to Cider with Rosie. And it's got this lovely line in it. He says he went out playing the violin, went to Spain. He was 19 and soft at the edges. And I like that line. I was 19 by this time. I wrote to Laurie Lee and I said, I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to go to Spain and play the violin on street corners. And he wrote back to me. I've still got this card from him. And he said, keep off the main roads and always take a diary with you. So I did. And my uncle he contacted the local paper. And to my surprise, they wanted to interview me about it. This is the Bournemouth Echo. And at that age, being in the Echo seemed amazing. These photographers turned up. They wanted me to play the violin on my bicycle. and in order to get a photograph, which is very difficult to do. I'll give you some advice. If you ever get asked to play a violin on a bicycle, say no. It doesn't hurt sometimes to say no. It can hurt to say yes, because I agreed to do it. And so I had to sort of play and cycle and try and play again, and in the end I was kind of playing like... And they got the photograph, but I fell over, went arse over tit in the road, and I've still got a picture that was in the echo. And then I thought I'd better actually go and do this. So I went to... The plan was to cycle to Morocco. I went to Le Havre, on the ferry, obviously, had my bicycle, had a violin, a sleeping bag, and £5. That's all I had. Back then, obviously, no credit cards, no mobile phones, no form of communication, nothing I could... And I went to Paris. I cycled to Paris. That took me all day, and that nearly killed me. I think it was 135 miles, I seem to recall. And so the next morning, I thought, right, I'll try busking in Paris. And I was terrified. I found these gardens with some railings behind me. It was quite quiet, but there were people around. I thought, right, okay, this is okay. And Laurie Lee said, if you're going to do this, you know, if you see older people walking along, you do that sort of romantic sort of thing, you know. Or if you see or younger people with beards, you know. That sort of thing, or I don't know. I did. Well, I didn't get any applause when I was in Paris on this occasion. Or if people looked a bit up themselves, you might... Blackadder. That sort of thing, you know. And, well, I wish you'd been there at the time, that's all I can say, because after about half an hour, all I'd made was half a franc, right? That's the equivalent of 5p, right? 50 centimes, which was pretty depressing, really, and a couple of random centimes. And then this lorry pulled up, and it reversed into me, and I was standing in front of these railings. I was still trying to play the violin while this lorry's coming up, but I don't know what to say. And I thought, no, I can't do this. And I carried on cycling. And this is where I'm glad I kept a diary, because I can't believe some of the things. I cycled. I thought, if I go down to the south of France, it would be possible to busk there. That would be a different kind of vibe. You know, I had visions of playing on the edge of the water, you know. So I carried on cycling, and I thought I could get to the south of France in 2 or 3 days. No sat-nav back then or anything like that. I just had this road map, very vague road map. And I cycled, and I ran out of money. And this is where I'm glad I kept a diary, because I was starving. On one occasion, I woke up, I'd just sleep in a field, no tent, just sleep in a field and get up in the morning, just cycle all day. And on one occasion, there were a load of stale bread rolls in a basket by the side of the road, so I ate those. And another occasion, I was so hungry. And it actually says in my diary, it says, I'm so proud of myself because today I cycled over 100 miles with no food and no drink. Which is not a clever thing to do, but somehow I survived. And I remember coming to this, as I nearly got to the south coast, I came across a vineyard, and I stopped there for the night. And there were all these unripe grapes. And I remember I started eating these things, and once I started, I couldn't stop. In fact, I think the reason it was a bad year for wine that year was mainly because I absolutely could not stop. You can imagine what that did to me, can't you? Anyway, I got to the... I eventually got down to the south coast. Oh, time is moving ever so quickly. I must be talking slowly or something. By this time, I'd only done about 5 minutes last week. Oh well. As I said, this is a rehearsal, you see. So anyway, I got down to the south of France, and I'm playing again, and by this time, it's 11:30 at night, and all the shops are shut. And people started giving me money, quite a lot of money actually. And I was hallucinating by this time. I was thinking, wow, somebody's just sort of giving me a sausage roll, you know. Somebody's giving me a bacon sandwich. And I was able to win. Anyway, that's it. I better cut this short, I suppose, because I've got... just to cut to the quick then. So years later, when I was 60, I thought I was desperate to do this sort of thing again. And then I came back. I used to do that every summer, and Oh, this is an example of how the world's changed. When I got down to Narbonne, my passport was stolen, which is possibly a good thing in a way. I was so cavalier about it. I'd gone busking and just left it in my saddlebag. And the next morning, so no passport, right? No money, no passport. Go to the police station, and I said, in very bad French, "Mon passeport, c'est volé," you know. And this very bored gendarme looked up at me, "Oh yeah." And he went to a drawer, and he got out a passport, an emergency passport, just got one out of the drawer, and asked me my name, filled it in, and gave me a passport. Seriously. And he said that I wasn't allowed to go to another country, but I could stay in France as long as I liked, and I could go home on that. And that became the norm. Anyway, to cut a long story as short as possible, that became the norm every year, and I would do the same sort of thing. And then when I was 60, I thought I wanted to do it again. So I decided that the same kind of adventure. So I decided I would cycle from Land's End to John O'Groats, towing. Well, I like to say it was towing a piano. It was actually an electric piano, but it still weighed quite a lot, and it nearly killed me. I kid you not. This was 7 years ago, and 9 people turned up at Land's End. And I got on this bike, had a trailer, had this piano on the back, and I thought, well, it's very, very much like the lady before. You've got to believe. It's all about belief, isn't it? You know, if you really believe in yourself, you can do anything. You know, theoretically, breastfeeding would still be a challenge, but so I thought I could do this. I can do this. You know. And then I came to this hill, and I thought I can't do this, but I did do it. I got all the way to. I did get to John O'Groats, and it nearly killed me. And anyway, I better stop now. So, any questions?
Mike Hatchard, everybody.